Hello. Welcome back to the Bordeaux show, ramblelog. This is 5,000 subscribers special. Thank you all, new and old, for watching me and joining this parade. This few months has been a bit special, filled with good news, bad news, because first of all, one of my videos blew up thanks to another YouTube creator, Grungeon Master, making me so grumpy I had to make a response video, of course, joking and playful. And I've been trying to start more fantasy related content for a while. This gave me a boost, and thankfully, thanks to the unknowable algorithm gods, this video blew up, and many of you new viewers came to my channel and hopefully liked what I make and stayed. Unfortunately, a few other things happened. A few days later, after my video started taking up speed, my maternal grandmother passed away. Exactly 2 years and 2 days after my grandfather passed away. We've been joking that my grandfather finally got tired of waiting and called her, and they're finally together in heaven, in Ancestral Georgia, as we like to call it, the heavenly Georgia. And it's been a bittersweet few weeks. Second week, I think, is now, and unfortunately I caught a virus which I'm still a bit hazy after. So it's been a bittersweet, rocky, but still I would like to say positive, because I don't like to look at death as an end and as something negative for the person who passed away. They're finally free of this mortal struggle, the mortal shell that has been becoming difficult to live in, and they're finally reunited with their loved ones, and the sad ones are us who are left behind. But enough of the sad sacchery. Let's get back to being happy about new subscribers and being thankful for the old for sticking around. Another little unfortunate circumstances is that due to my illness, I'm still very ill and I should not be out in the woods, into the cold windy woods right now, but I really wanted to go today to a festival, to a carnival, ancient Georgian carnival masquerade called Berik Aoba, which is held in very far and remote villages where Soviet militant atheist government who tried to stamp out any form of deviant culture couldn't get to them. And due to that remote nature, I, in my ill state, really tried and hoped for that I would be strong and healthy enough to go and take my friends with. I unfortunately couldn't. I couldn't manage to get a car. That's another point. I need to finally get around to it and learn how to drive. I really should have learned how to drive about 6 or 7 years ago, but the city I live in is really anti-car, and let's just say our current government is very heavy traffic friendly. They want to make having a car as uncomfortable and dreadful as possible, so more people use public transport. But due to my videos where I want to showcase culture and history of this wonderful region, I really want to go to village festivals and remote rural traditional events, but unfortunately I couldn't. I really wanted to go because Berik Aoba is really interesting tradition. It's very ancient and has pagan roots, has historical roots of playing out old tragedies. And I wanted to showcase this event and make a video from there, but this little woods have to do for now. but hopefully next year I'll get around to. So let's make this video a little bit more loosey-goosey and chit-chatty. Unfortunately, we cannot get to Perik Auba silliness, which is, I'll talk about it later in more of a professional setting with the written script, because it's a bit more complicated ritual that unfortunately haven't seen live and really wanted to go, but then I got heavy temperature and couldn't recover in time. So, but let's leave all negativity behind and let's talk about some fun topics, right? And to get more into the mood, there's my bloody lighter. And there. One thing that is on my mind and on my heart is, of course, passing away of my maternal grandmother, Ineza Abesadze, who was a very interesting person that I unfortunately always regret, that when your loved one passes away, you get the feeling that you had so many things to learn from them, so much to know about them. Of course, a lifetime is not enough to fully know a person and even know yourself, but you always get the sense that you could have known more about them. But what I knew of my grandmother and her husband, my maternal grandfather, was that they were, how should I say that? Great people. I don't want to brag or exaggerate. Oh, I love to exaggerate. Okay, I want to exaggerate, but in this case, you don't need to exaggerate how interesting and how impactful my grandmother's life was, and be it her relationship with my grandfather, her own personal achievements, and her children, my mother and my uncles, who all achieved a lot and became part of Georgian culture. What do I mean by this? Many of you are not Georgian and are not from the Caucasus or Soviet Union, so you might not heard of my family, my mother's side and my father's side, but I'll focus on my mother's side currently. I'll start with my maternal grandmother, then I will cover my maternal grandfather. Basically, this is going to be a little family lore drop, Bordeaux's backstory. Learning about my backstory, basically. I'll talk about my grandmother, Ineza Abesadze, who was from a Gurian family. This is from western Georgia, and had ancestry from Megrelian dynasty. Chichua were one of the lords of the region, high lords, and she was also from a high status family, but unfortunately when Soviet Union came around, there were no more lords and ladies, and generation of my grandparents suffered through the repressions. They are the children of repressed families. You, of course, I assume if you are watching my channel, you at least heard of Soviet repressions, of political dissidents, of royals, noble families, not just noble families, non-Soviet status people, charismatic people, poets, artists, community leaders, figureheads, and free peasants who managed to achieve some sort of progress and wealth in their life. They call them kulaks. I'm from a mix of noble and kulak families. All of my family members were kulakized, and those that weren't were straight up repressed and killed. That's where my grandparents grew up, knowing that their fathers and their family members were killed, were deported, were sent to the front lines in World War II, or killed by the Soviets themselves. There's a horrible tragedy. Speaking of my maternal grandmother, Ineza Abesadze, her father was a popular engineer in the Gurian factory, chemical factory, if I'm not mistaken. And because he was of a middle class in Soviet, pre-Soviet, I mean, no, he came out in the I'm doing family arithmetics. He probably became an engineer, a prominent person when Soviets came around, but he was born during Russian Empire. Georgians had an interesting status in Russian Empire, where we composed a large part of the military, especially general class, like not just generals, general military leaders, especially in the Caucasus regions, which I have to admit we did some unfortunate things in the Caucasus. This is sin my family indirectly may bear. We don't know, but we might. So, and I'm not saying that like the allegations are true. Abkhazians, like, I'm not going to get into hard details, but I'll say this. I started talking about my grandmother, and we're back into 17th century, 18th century Russian imperialism. Okay, quick history side note. When Russians tricked and invaded Georgia and took over different Georgian regions, many of the nobles first started to rebel, but they were, let's just say, it's commonplace when an empire takes over an ethnic region with diverse culture and a deep history. Think of India, think of China, for example, Middle Eastern occupation, especially post-Ottoman regions. So think of that there is an ancient historical conflict. A new empire comes in this case Russia, and our conflict was with Ottomans and Iran at that time. Soviet Union comes in with a proposition that we're going to help you out in dealing with this invading empires. Georgia unfortunately gets duped. I'm going to go deeper detail in later video. Gives us an offer that we're going to help you out, but you become our vassal states. No, not vassal, under protectorate. Georgia was meant to become Russian Empire's protectorate, but when we signed this agreement, Russians, of course, betrayed us, and rather than becoming their ally, we became under their direct occupation. We had stipulated that we're not going to lose our independence, our statehood, our independent church, and our royal family. They took all of them away from us immediately. The people that rebelled, the noble class that rebelled, Russians managed to convince them to become their proxies. They did exactly the same in India. If you know a little bit history of India, you'll find a lot of parallels here. Rather than directly start conflict, they start conflict with one another. Georgians and Caucasians, Georgians and Georgians, different regions of Georgia. Then the winners of that group were elevated into a higher status, and they became the imperial enforcers and assistants for the Russian Empire, dominating the Caucasus region and dominating Iran and Ottoman Empire. I'm not going to defend them. So why I'm talking about Georgian lords and Caucasian imperialism while I'm talking about my grandmother? Because both of my grandmothers are from Georgian Gentry class. My maternal grandmother, who I'm talking about, who passed away recently, was related to Chichua lords. And my paternal grandmother, related to the Khoperia, she's a Khoperia. She's alive, just fine, 92 years old, still has more energy than me, and God willing, she would live much longer. She was from Aznauri. Batoni and Aznauri both were gentry class. Batoni were lords with royal blood who are from much older families than even Georgian kings, maybe, and Georgian king family. Bagrationi dynasty is the oldest family in Europe. Think about that. And Aznauri are land owners. They might not have such ancient ancestors. They might be from more of a military class who gained the knightly class. This would be the knightly, more like nobles, knights, and higher military, but Georgian form. This is very different from European knightly class. I'm going to talk about this later, of course. This is a deep dive ramble. This is a deep ramble. And they gained their land through service in the military, usually, or gained their land through honor, and basically king gave them. They lived under and governed land given them to them by the king or even the lord. Lords could do the same because lords needed their elite military class, of course. Their lieges, liege lord, basically. Funny enough, both of my grandmothers were from this class. One was a lord, one was a liege. Or I'll make a special dedicated video talking about the noble classes and the peasantry, how they related to each other, and how was it different in Georgia, because it's super duper unique here. Trust me, guys, that's why I'm making this whole channel, because as a history nerd, I'm just really upset that you guys don't get to hear how cool Georgian Middle Ages and history in general was. Okay, going back to my grandmother, who I really love. That's just because that she is from a noble family. Her noble parents, one of my grandmother's noble parents, my living ones, was repressed because he was of course a liberal filmmaker, the theater director. That's my great-grandfather, mother of my living grandmother, who is fine, and I shouldn't be talking about her. And my grandmother's father, the one that passed away, unfortunately, and the one that I also dearly loved. Her father was a factory leader, was probably part, maybe previous government, more liberal socialist. The Menshevik party was in charge before then, and her father was taken. Actually, he himself volunteered. His brother was taken away, I think, and he himself also volunteered, and both of the brothers were sent in unfortunately very tragic space in the Crimean front in World War II, where, as we unfortunately found out, we beforehand thought that they died fighting Nazis, but unfortunately Soviets did a false flag attack that killed my great-grandfather and his brother, I think, as well, and many of other Georgians. That was basically another military massacre orchestrated by Joseph Stalin, who wanted to get rid of people who he thought were anti-him and anti-government, but didn't have any actual, how would I say, concrete proof of their disloyalty. And many who disappeared, and they couldn't find their bodies. They repressed their families, taking children into Siberia. My grandmother, the other grandmother, actually was born in Central Asia from a Siberian mother and a Georgian father, the living one, not the other who passed away. The living one is half Siberian. Basically, I'm 11.5 or something like that. 12.5 Siberian, I think. Because my grandfather was taken in Siberia. Then after serving, he sent a shot. Going back to my grandmother who passed away, whose father was sent to Crimean front lines and were killed by the Soviets. Hard to understand why, but that's the information that I have. I might go make a deep dive in the future about this topic. She grew up with her sister and with a single mother who never remarried and stayed loyal to their father. They grew up, she told me many times the rough situation she grew up. It was very difficult. Her family was repressed because they came from some means and those means were taken away. She grew up in a komunalka, which is basically houses from noble families who had multiple story houses. You can find in Old Tbilisi, were forcibly taken away. They, if they were lucky, they would get a closet to live in, or even less, live with 4 other or 10 other families, and tens of families from rural places and even from different countries were forcibly or willingly, depending on the situation, many times forcibly, taken from villages and put into cities to become the working class. Basically, in Soviet Union, there was no large working class. Soviet Revolution took place on a complete lie. There was no fucking working class to start a revolution with. Most of them were landowning peasants, and most of them didn't even participate. They created liberal democracies, for example Georgia, of course, and Ukraine and other places. There is a lot of misinformation, especially about this region, that Soviet revolutionaries freed the people. No, people freed themselves. Soviet revolutionaries took over. They weren't even elected. Well, technically they were elected in Russia, and they didn't even get elected there. So the Mensheviks actually got more seats. And the Menshevik government was established in Georgia, willingly elected. I wouldn't vote for them, but they were willingly elected. Okay, another crazy deep dive. I'm gonna make a dedicated video about early Georgian state and how Soviet the delusion and propaganda permeates even Western academia, not just Eastern. So basically, I'm freezing my ass off. Ineza Abesadze grew up without a father in a komunalka, struggling but trying her best. She actually became one of the Georgia's first camera models. I'll show her picture. She was a stunningly beautiful woman all her life, even especially when she was my grandma. Especially she was my grandma. And she was beautiful to her very last day. And she was on track to be a future Georgian actress, a star of the silver screen. And she actually played in a couple of movies. She was a star, not just for me. But then she met my grandfather, Elguja Burduli. Elguja Burduli was from Tiuleti, the mountains of Georgia. This is the genetic code that was imprinted, the dominant genes that took over every other, especially in the physical department. I'm big, strong, and large. Thanks to my grandfather Elguja Burduli, who was bigger, larger, and stronger. And he was from, speaking about families, he was from a very honored Burduli family that he made even more popular and even more honorable. Burduli clan, I think a proper term would be a clan, because it's a mountain, large family with castle and fort and fortification. But one of my dreams, if I get enough money, is to rebuild my ancestral keep. And my grandfather's family, Burdulebi, were entrusted in keeping the gates to the underworld, or not to the to the other side. My grandfathers, the Burduli, were entrusted as the guardians of the gate of the other side, the other world, the northern plains, the northern Caucasus. If you want, I'll go way deeper in a future video about my ancestry, even deeper ancestry, not just my grandparents, the lore, deep lore of me. Which is very interesting. I'm gonna do a quick version here. Burduli means owl gate. So basically, the night's watch. Not joking. Bu means owl. Urduli means gate. The gate, the thing that stands in the way, and they were basically the owl watchers, the watchers, the night watchers, the night's watch. Yes, even cooler than that, even cooler than Game of Thrones Night's Watch. Trust me, like it's a perfect example, like 1-to-1 almost. You know how Night's Watch mission was to stop the bloody wildlings, but their true mission, their true ancestral mission, that they unfortunately might have forgotten, or may have not. I have not. Was to keep the gates not just from barbarians, the wildlings. That's like when you're thinking about the South Caucasians and North Caucasians, think of the Northmen, the North, and the bloody wildlings. North Caucasians, please don't get mad at me, but I think it's a good analogy. That's North Caucasians represented the wildling warrior, the free-spirited, we have no king, we have no lord, Jon Snow kind of mountain men, and their pride. And from the south of the wall, Caucasus actually was real, the Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall is just pile of little sticks and stones compared to the Caucasus Mountains, who serve the exact closer purpose to what Game of Thrones walls served, to stop the northern demons, the Hybori, the Scourge, the Uj-Majuj, the demons of the northern winds. Our ancestral mission was to stop the frozen undead hordes of Kashchei Besmirtny and his horde of demon icemen. The armies of Zhuj Majuj. We were meant to hold the gates closed. We were meant to stop the demons. But nay, our hatred was towards the wild men of the north, who raided and pillaged us. Motherfucker, Game of Thrones is not about England. Game of Thrones is about Caucasus. I'm telling you, motherfucker, it's just stretched out the Caucasus. Okay, I'm going next video. How Georgia is more Game of Thrones than fucking the Britain or England, or I'll think about the name. But basically, going back to my grandfather, Elguja Burduli, who was from a family like Starks, who are meant to hold the gate. Going back to my grandfather, he himself, not his ancestral lore, he went to university with my grandmother. I think he was in engineering. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I might. They were in university. She was 1 year older than my grandfather. My grandfather charmed her with his wild mountain charms, which he later used to charm the whole world. Well, the Eastern European part of the whole world. Basically, he was more traditional, my grandfather. He said, my lovely darling wife, I appreciate and I love that you're so beautiful, but you are mine now, and maybe choose a career path that doesn't involve me getting very jealous of other men, because I am El Guja Burduli and I'm famous street hooligan who kicks everyone's ass, who even looks at you funny, and you are one of the most beautiful girls in town, literally one of the first models of the whole country, a whole region of the Soviet Union, and of course in Soviet Union in general. My grandmother, who was more of a appeaser and more of a the noble in her mentality, a noble lady, and had to deal with a lot of noble masculine man, warrior. She was more understanding of my grandfather's needs and chose to support his husband. Sorry, my camera cut off. I might have rambled on for far too long, but I feel it is important to appreciate our family members, especially our grandparents, as they are our links to our ancestors. But I want to talk about my grandma Ineza, for who she was and what she meant for me and many others. She sacrificed herself for her family, helping her husband achieve great things. We must not forget that behind many great men are great women who are the bedrocks that they stand on. Without them, I don't think my grandfather could have achieved what he did. She kept a 60-year marriage to a larger-than-life person and had 3 children who achieved great things of their own. None of them could have done it without her support, including me, of course, but she was able to accomplish great deeds of her own. She was a teacher of a proper diction, helping children improve their speech. I hope it rubbed off on me too. She worked at Pioneer Palace, or National Youth and Children's Palace, which is a very historically important building with very, very long and complex lore behind it. But for now, short version, it was an old imperial palace, became Soviet after-school activity center. Later, the Declaration of Independence was signed there, and it continued to serve as youth center for learning many different skills and trades. I basically grew up there. My regret is that I couldn't attend all the classes it had to offer. She worked as a diction tutor to improve speech, but she went above and beyond, giving culture to these children, teaching hundreds over the years, taking these kids to historical sites, teaching them about poetry and literature, improving not just their ability to speak, but bringing high culture and education that no school could have ever given them. Looking back, she went above and beyond for a very miserable pay. Her only job requirement was to help children pronounce their words properly, but her dedication went beyond that. She taught these kids about art, culture, and history, bringing hundreds to church for the first time, letting them meet famous artists through her connections. She did a lot for just the love of her students. Ineza Abesadze was from a great family, created a great family of her own, helped his husband and his children thrive, and helped educate hundreds of children over decades of her life. All I can say is that I'm lucky to be her grandson. Alright, if you manage to power through my unhinged ramblings, I thank you. This isn't what I usually do. Well, I ramble on about history, culture, so I think it isn't all that strange. I just wanted to show where my passions came from. It's hard to deal with the loss of a loved one. Remembering and appreciating them is the best thing we can do. And know that they are in a better place. After this, we go back to our regularly scheduled history, mythology, and fantasy content. Again, thank you all, new and old, for joining, and very special thanks to my wonderful supporters on Patreon. Thanks, and hug your grandparents if you can.